You don't take these jobs if you can't deal in that kind of an atmosphere, because the chances are you're going to. You may do something that's seriously a mistake. But chances are it won't be you. Chances are it'll be somebody else. But you're going to take the credit for it. You know, I'd say, oh, the buck stops there. So you better realize that, and you may become a casualty. And I realized that in Yellowstone.
I bumped in again to that researcher, and he told me that he was one of the people that they'd moved over by the inn when the firestorm hit, and he was there with his hand over his head, and he said it was pretty exciting, and he was, and what I didn't know at the time was his name was Jack Ward Thomas. And Jack and I, of course, over the years have gotten to know each other, but 6 years later, Jack is at the base of Storm King Mountain with 13 firefighters lost, and some of them were his. And he said the first thing that came to my mind was Old Faithful. He remembered what it was like to be in the middle of a firestorm. He said, I never want to put people out in front of that kind of thing again.
The Yellowstone fires sort of gave us a sense that, we really need to think about change over much broader spans of time, that these events that occur perhaps every 4 or 5 centuries, or maybe even more sporadically than that, and yet we tend not to adjust our thinking to that kind of uncertainty, that scale of uncertainty, and that's really critical.
And I walked there for a full half an hour, pacing a crown fire. And I had to walk right along. But with my weather observations, I went in and was interviewed by Rothermere. And that was right at the end of July. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, walking alongside a crown fire. And knowing I was fine. I was walking in a meadow. I had to kind of stand off because it was hot. So he writes this paper, Predicting Behavior of the 98 Yellowstone Fires, Projections versus the Reality. Reason I didn't go in and be a fire behavior officer, I took 490 in April of '88. I got a really good score academically, the only time I ever got an academically fine score. And then went to Yellowstone and I realized this stuff is just all useless.
He gets there and we got about 22 minutes to get to downtown Washington. I said, you better call them and tell them we need to do this another night. He said, we'll be there. Buckle your seatbelt. And I'll tell you, Dave, this guy, I don't know how fast he was going, with me in the back seat, flying down the dullest access road in this limousine, I know going over 100 miles an hour, and he came screaming into Washington, down the side streets, gets to the studio. There's 3 people standing on the curb. One of them whips the back door open, and one of them grabs me by the left arm, and I step out, and I grab my hat, and another one's got me by the right arm, and they're walking me in, making up my face while I'm walking into the door of this studio. They walked me in, set me in a chair, backed away, and went like that. And I'm on the camera talking to Koppel.
What happened in 1988 was the rains quit in June. They didn't come in August, and every cold front that came by had high winds and no rain. That hadn't happened before. Yeah, that's a worst case scenario. But the probability of that happening was so small that it hadn't been recorded.
Huge, huge smoke from, and being on fire, you're used to seeing some, but these were big ones. And it was like, we were standing there and you'd look and and then all of a sudden you'd pivot around and you'd look north and you look to the west. And it was just kind of surreal.
They had a media center set up down in West Yellowstone. There was a Washington Post reporter showed up in a 3-piece suit to cover the fires, and so that's the kind of, experience you were getting. Imagine his understanding of natural fire, and there was none.
What I didn't see coming in '88 was how long it was going to last. I remember being at a briefing now. It was in the Yellowstone, in the fire hall at Mammoth, and it was late September, and I was so sick of smoke and firefighters being around, and you know, it's like, how long can you be ramped up for in emergency status? That when 2000 started to happen around here, it was about a week into it, and I thought, uh-oh, this is going to last a while. So what I did mentally was just say, I got to pace myself. And the information officers that were working with me, I said, you cannot be doing 12, 14-hour days, day after day after day. You will not last. So you will take a day off when it comes up, and we all will just chill out here and have other lives besides this emergency, because it'll consume us otherwise.
You know, I often look back and think, what would be the one lesson learned that I would want to share with people in the sense of my experience there, and I think to me it has to do with also taking care of you as a person too, and realizing that these are tremendously stressful situations you get into. And we've had a couple of information officers who have dealt with situations where they have left incidents and never want to do fire again.
I think over the years there's always a tad of friction or maybe jealousy, maybe resentment, I really don't know, between Forest Service, Park Service, especially if you live around the queen or the king of parks. You know, that's pretty intimidating to be there, and we respect. I think it was. I think it's certain to say that we, the Forest Service, at least from my perspective, respected that park and would do almost anything for it, except for Barbie, you know. But the serious part of that was when things really went to hell in a handbasket. Then I think that seriously, very seriously, required not only Bob and I, but Bob and a whole bunch of other supervisors to really hold hands. I mean, that's the way it was. And
I guess the real lesson in there, and as I said, I had it happen again after that, is you better have your message right, and you better have it right from day one, and you better have everybody on the same sheet. Now that's a really formidable task, particularly when an incident is breaking. But man, if you get behind, you're done.
Bob, Barbie, and the team at Yellowstone were as dedicated to protecting that park as they could possibly be. They were doing everything humanly possible that was available to them in terms of resources to protect the park. I can't think of anything I could have done that would have enhanced that. I felt that the biggest contribution I made was in supporting them, trying to give them the resources that they wanted and needed to fight the fire, try to keep the political pressure from slowing them down, interfering with their decisions. Yeah, I could fight the political battles, I couldn't fight the fire.
That was the number one enemy that I was working with, was fear. And the way you normally fight that is with accurate, easily accessible information.
I mean, she was being tugged by fire officials on the one hand, trying not to be too open with us, and on the other hand, understanding, I think, what the role of the press was in covering that story. And she was giving us as much information as she had available. She wasn't holding anything back, but she didn't know everything that was going on either, which is often the case when you have a fire information official or a fire information officer.
And I would walk up to people and listen in on conversations, and they would say, hey, you know, they would read the waysides, they would be at Grant Village at the exhibits, and they would say, you know, this doesn't look that bad, you know, and yeah, I can understand how this has got to recycle. And so I think that the folks in interpretation or whoever did everything in the Park Service respected the American public, that they were intelligent enough to take the scientific information and assimilate it and see it.
You know, at the time that Yellowstone burned, it seemed like the end of an era. It seemed like that to me. And so I guess it's the changing, ever-changing nature of the landscape that is probably the important lesson in Yellowstone. And it's going to change whether we're there or not.
Suddenly, it got real calm. There was no wind at all. And then I heard this humming noise. What in the world's going on? And the next instant, My hard hat blew off. Trees came crashing down. They broke off. They fell over, and just tremendous wind just hit us. And of course, we started to run back towards the road and get out of there. And we got back, and we went, what in the world was that all about? And we drove along the road for 3.5 miles, and here were trees laying down.
Well, once we survived the fires and didn't lose our job, I had a lot of self-confidence that we had done something right. I never had doubted that what we were doing was the right thing to do for Yellowstone and for the resource. You know, somebody's got to stand up for the frogs and the bears.
In military terms, he was the battle captain, so he knew what the mission was. He knew where the fire was. He understood where he thought the fire was going. He knew what resources he had. He knew the timeline he had to employ those resources. So it was clear he was always thinking ahead, and the million of factors that all had to come together to say, okay, this is what we're going to do today and tomorrow.
The North Fork fire still burning in September, getting ready to attack Old Faithful. And for all of us who were there and your role in that, it's not a day you're gonna forget.